Thank you so much for coming to this talk today. I've got an initial confession for you, only a small one this time. When I was putting this talk together, I realized I had a difficulty in that in platform engineering and platform as a product engineering, as I practice it, there are some incredible people in the industry doing this and talking about it and educating everyone about it. And I think that's fantastic, but it means that when I was first putting this together, after Kevlin said, "Can you please come and do a talk in Copenhagen?" my instinctive reaction was, "Great, I'll spend some time with some lovely people." My second reaction was, "Oh my goodness, what am I going to talk about in this regard?" So this is what I've come up with, and I hope it's interesting to you. And the first thing to, again, sort of talk to you about is I was incredibly overwhelmed this morning because I am so happy to still be here and alive. I will explain a little bit more why in a minute. There is part of the story here. But it was one of those things where I realized last night and this morning that I'm around a group of people that care so much about what we do. And it just hit me. I immediately welled up on the walk to the venue today. And to see all of you out there today and still here after lunch and, not asleep yet, which is good, is so wonderful. So thank you very much. And actually at that moment in time, I had a wobble and I texted a great friend of mine, Karina Clamp. She's a wellness coach and she's far smarter than I. And she just said this message to me, which is, go forth, make a positive impact with what you love to do. And I sat there and thought, damn it, that's pretty much what the talk's about. That's the whole thing. She gives it away in the first slide. But it was so lovely to receive that, and it got me through here to speak to you now. And of course, this morning, if those of you who saw the keynote, enjoyed the keynote, Barbara talked about metaphors. Metaphors will also feature in this talk. As a product designer, engineer, owner, steward, I care enormously about the metaphors and the stories of what a product means to the people that are using and consuming it. And so we'll talk a little bit about how to think about those things and how they are so important to getting a complicated product into a place where it actually delivers benefit. Okay, so this isn't a talk specifically, thank goodness, on product strategy, because following someone like Simon, I was like, no, please don't go there. I'm good. I can cut all of that out. So we're not going to do a lot on product strategy, but I will explain to you how I approach it. And I should, as for complete disclosure, mention I do an awful lot of Wardley mapping where I currently work. It's an incredible technique to sort of drive out those assumptions. And you've seen some of it earlier, and it's just so easy to do. So get your hands dirty with that one. It's brilliant. But I'm not going to go too much about that because you've had Simon already. Okay, so my hope for this talk, straight out there, first base, I would like everyone here to understand what I think a great product is, what it means for there to be a great product in the world, and then what a great technical, underscored, product owner tries to do. And partly this is because there are a lot of product owners in the world, product managers, and there's very few I've met that have the technical piece as an important part of what they do and what they think. And so one of my missions is to try to recruit you, like a cult, into the idea of becoming technical product owners as a career path. Because I was an engineer. I am an engineer. I still code. I don't code a lot. You maybe wouldn't want to read it. But I do code. And at the same time, I get enormous value out of doing this crazy job of technical product ownership. I'll talk about why I don't like the title so much in a minute. A bit of a trigger warning for you on this, and it probably should be a smaller trigger warning than that. It's not a big one. I've got two stories really to share with you. The first one is fairly straightforward, shouldn't be any big triggers. The second one is very personal to me, and I'm going to share a lot of things in it that may trigger you. So if it does, please feel free to take whatever time you need. If you need to leave in the second half of the talk, that's okay. And if you want to talk to me afterwards about anything I share, then please come and grab me. I'm the shortest person in the room. You can't, well, you can miss me because I'm the shortest person in the room. But yeah, you can just come and find me, come and talk to me. I am a bit of an introvert. Okay, so I'm just warning you. I don't look it right now, but I am. So if I'm walking around looking a little bit dazed and confused, that's me open for conversation. I don't look it, but I am. So yeah, please approach me. Okay, so first story goes back about 15 years, back to when I had hair. It's a while ago. And I'm in complete and utter terror. It's my first day on the job at a new company, and I am part of a training group. And I'm not frightened because it's a new company. I'm not frightened because of the technology. I'm not even frightened to be faced with a room full of aggressive learners. I'm petrified because my colleague has just said, "You're okay to teach the next module, aren't you?" I was terrified. Not only did I have to teach a module on a technology that I was unfamiliar with, it was a technology I'd never touched before. But I had two things going for me that relate to building great platform products, because it was a platform that we were training people in. The first thing is that it was very straightforward to approach this technology, and it was consistent in its principles. This is to talk a little bit about product principles. Because those principles were things I knew. I didn't know what I was going to go look at. I didn't know what the slides looked like. But I absolutely knew the principles that underpinned how that technology, that platform, that product had come to life. So I didn't know it. I was still terrified. But I actually had something enormously in my favor. And what it actually ended up feeling like is I could be very clever. I could be smart. I could look like the smartest person in the room describing a technology I'd never seen. And I carried that with me through the rest of my career. It doesn't happen often, I'll be honest. But I have focused on the principles that underpin that moment, that gave me that superpower to be able to explain and explore and even train people in something that I'd never seen before. So that first principle is really to make the right thing to do simple. So I knew the right way to write some great code and to do some software development. And that was already baked into this piece of technology I was exploring. And then make other things possible. Leave the freedoms and the flexibilities in the right places. And because the entire rest of this platform followed this particular principle, whatever I was training on in this particular product, I already knew how it should feel. I already knew what sort of story even the product should tell. And that was an enormous superpower to have in my pocket. And the other one that was in there, one that I carry with me now, and think about the products you build, the platforms you build right now. Do they surprise? And I don't mean delight. I mean surprise in the horrific sense. What sort of surprises do the people that use your platform or your product, what surprises do they bump into? One of the benefits of creating a platform is you are continuously surprised by what users are doing with it. That's okay, but you shouldn't be trying to surprise them. Okay, I'm not a big fan of that dynamic. And the other thing, the last thing really that came out of that is the code itself is a communication between humans. So the very code that was in our platform, if you went and read it, you could understand what things did. Before I went out and gave this training, I'd only had to open up a few classes, it was Java at the time, and explore some of the code, and I was like, I get it. That's because the craft and the tests, the unit tests, integration tests told me exactly how it was supposed to operate. So easy to read. Now, you may guess what the product was or the platform. It was the Spring framework. It was way back in the day when I was first encountering Spring. That's how young I was. And you can probably criticize the framework for many things. not least because it's a framework. I think it's a common one. But what it did do is follow these principles, and that meant that it delivered as an incredible platform. And what it introduced to me was what a good platform can do, which I sort of loosely, tongue-in-cheek, call the golden ratio, which is kind of the number of platform engineers, people working on it, my groups, my teams, how many of them to how many is using it. Very simple. And most companies have a sort of inflection point. Organizations get to a point where they suddenly go, we probably need to have more than just an accidental platform now. We want to intentfully create a platform. And that point is around here, which is where I currently am, where I currently work. Which means I kind of have one platform engineer to around 10, stream-aligned product engineers. Okay? But this is what I'd experienced 15 years ago. There was only, it was a small number of hundreds, probably less than 200 platform engineers to millions of consumers of the platform, millions of people. Now you'll notice I keep going back to people, not users and consumers and customers, because it's the people part of it that I was focusing on the most. People that like using existing habit, their habitat is the platform, was the measure of its success. And we talk a lot about the jaws that happen when you're doing platform engineering. That ratio should be changing in this direction. We start off with 1 to 10, and then it's 1 to 20 and 1 to 40. We're not trying to scale the number of people working on the platform product. We're trying to scale the number of people that are finding it a great way to do their work. That's the measure of success. And so I had a wonderful lesson very early in my career that said, this is what it can look and feel like. I'm so grateful for that lesson. Unfortunately, I didn't have it again for many years. Back to 2020, and most of us were in terror again. This time, nothing to do with having to train anyone. It was entirely to do with COVID and a pandemic. But while the rest of the planet pretty much was struggling with COVID, and eventually, thank goodness, overcoming it through the power of science, I was struggling with a different big C. I was struggling with cancer. It's probably one of the worst times to get this news, is in the middle of a pandemic. By the way, that overstretched health service is also going to have a new addition, me, for a critical set of treatments. This is where my second story begins. Not that long ago, three and a half years ago, this is where I was. This beautiful monstrosity is a carbuncle on the side of the Brighton Hospital, and this is the Sussex Cancer Centre. This is where I spent some of the most difficult parts of my life. And that's the story I'm going to tell you about today to frame, really the big message I want you to take away. In this place, if no one's actually had chemoradiotherapy before, because this was my journey, 6 weeks of chemoradiotherapy. If you're fortunate never to have experienced this, thank goodness. If you know people that have, my heart goes out to you. It is a very difficult journey, or it can be. The first thing they said to me when they said you're going to get chemotherapy is, don't worry, the cocktail we're going to give you, you won't lose your hair. I'll admit it wasn't the first concern. In fact, if anything, my hope was I would, and then it'd come back. That was my one possibility. So they said, you're going to do 6 weeks of chemoradiotherapy, and it was during this time that I had so many lessons to learn that I'm going to share with you now about product development, bizarrely enough. Okay, but I need a cast of characters, and that includes my good friend Jules. On day 1 in the chemotherapy ward, again, if you've never seen a chemotherapy ward, who here has been at an airport when your plane is cancelled? Right. You know how miserable everybody is at that moment? The chemo lounge is exactly like that. Everyone is in the airport and no one's going where they want to go. And understandably, it's a bit like riding the tube, the subway in London. No one's got any eye contact. No one wants to talk. No one wants to be there. You're there for hours. getting these cocktails supplied. So imagine my surprise, in my first day in there, that first Monday, I met this person called Jules. This was the only person in there that was laughing. She was laughing at what was happening around her. There was actually people tripping up over wires, and she thought it was hilarious. She was the only person in there that was laughing. She had every reason to not be the person that was laughing. She had a cold cap on her head to try to keep her hair. It was one of those systems where you reduce the temperature of the scalp to try and give you a 50-50 chance of keeping your hair throughout the treatments. So it's a grueling procedure, but I was just struck by the spirit of somebody to actually be smiling and laughing whilst going through this enormously difficult time. So I struck up a conversation because I thought she looked brilliant. She'd been through chemotherapy many times. This was not her first rodeo. So in many respects, she became the person to help me through it. So we spent the next 6 weeks talking about a wide variety of things. We had similar age kids, and we discussed the challenges of having 15-year-old girls in your life. It's very difficult. And we discussed a lot of things. But what I want to talk to you today is actually one of the first questions she asked me, which is, let's get there. What are you here for? Now, she didn't mean, what am I here for my chemotherapy? Because we all know we're there for the cocktail. But it was a question that you get asked a lot when you get a critical illness. If you survive this, you can't help but ask the question, what am I here to do? Why am I surviving this? Why am I going through this absolute hell? And I'd love to say that it was all about my family or, being there for the futures of X, Y, and Z. But it wasn't. It became such a deep conversation. And a deep conversation over many weeks that I want to share it with you now. So, one thing we hear is, am I here because I'm a product manager? I'm a product owner. Is that what gets me out of bed in the morning, creating something? No, not really. Don't care. Not that big a fan of technology most of the time. I still use a fountain pen. That's how old-fashioned I am. So no, it's not the product that gets me excited. So it's not the thing that really matters. Is it what I do that matters? Is it the engineering? Is it the process? Is it the excitement of the collaboration? Is it the fact we're producing something at all? Is it because I'm an owner? Do I get a kick as an ego person? It's my product. Therefore, it's all on me. It's my success, your failure, that sort of level. Is it because of that? Is it because I manage something or I manage people? We went through the full gamut of everything I do and eventually came up with the awkward realization that none of it was why I enjoyed doing it. Even more confessionally, is it the business impact, all those wonderful things that we talk about we're doing when we're building a platform as a product? It's the business impact we're going to enable, blah, 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 scale. Economies of scale, etc. Is it that? No, not really. Because it's brutal when you're sitting there facing a potential not being around anymore. You feel very honest to it, and you can be very confessional about the fact of what really matters to you, and none of that did. So understandably, at the end of the first week of chemotherapy and radiotherapy, the question was, what really matters to you, Russ? And I had no good answer whatsoever. Week 2. First thing I entered into week 2 with, I was like, I've got it, Jules. I really like this other phrase for what I do. I see myself as a curator of a platform that tries to help people do great work. So I'm the steward. That owner label didn't work for me. I have a stewardship of something. That means it's my job to help my teams get really close to the experiences of the people that use our platform so that we can collectively come up with something that really changes their world. I love this. I'm a product steward. And then so that's great, but Jules was like, well, what does that mean, really, as a steward? I said, well, I do platform engineering. Now, this industry's got an issue. I've mentioned it before on stage. We really need to stop naming things. We're tragic. All right, I'm going to point one finger at one thing. No sequel. No sequel. We name something after what it's not some of the time. Focusing on the thing that didn't matter in the first place. So yeah, that should have barred us from all naming committees immediately. And in some respects, platform engineering is not as bad as NoSQL. But it's got some of the same challenges because, unfortunately, it doesn't really describe, for me, what mattered. Is it the fact we're engineering something that matters? Well, I've already talked about it. It's not the thing we do that mattered to me. Couple that with it being a platform or not, the thing doesn't matter much either. So we've got a name for something that is going to be hard to translate into obvious value to people, including me speaking to Jules. So she came up with a brilliant question then. She said, well, what does it change in the world? What are you doing? What's different because of what you do? And so that led me to a realization that one of the big principles is that every product is a change in the world. By its presence, you're hoping to encourage change. And I started to feel I was edging closer to what actually matters to me. So I talked to people about it. So we're creating something, we're putting something out there. What will be the change? What will be the difference for what we've done? When we expend our life creating something, what does it do? What is it going to make different for the world? And so this is how I explained it to Jules. I took this picture that I took of Mount Everest when I went there many, many years ago. And I said, that's kind of what the world looks like without platform engineering. I said, it's a mountain and it's dangerous. There's a lot of people that want to go skiing and don't realize, maybe not Mount Everest, that's a bit of a stretch, but they're going off to the mountains. And what's happening is we're running search and rescue all the time. As a platform engineering team, and you're in the early stages of your journey, you don't really have a product. You just have stuff. And people are getting lost all the time using it through no fault of their own because they don't know where the boundaries are. They've got no idea where the safety margins are. They're just doing things because that's the way they've always done it. And so we spend, our entire lives on expensive search and rescue. And what we really want is a ski slope. We want a ski resort. We want après-ski. Not too much of it, just enough for fun. We want guardrails and barriers. We want people to know when they're on-piste or off-piste. We want them to be able to make that decision. We may not want to stop them. We want them to know where all the facilities are. We want an identifiable product, not just a mountain. We want a ski resort that somebody can point at and go, I want to go there and start using that. And we want to do it in a way that helps people be creative safely so that they can thrive, so that they can learn to ski, there are beginner slopes. And then there are more advanced stuff. There's a double black diamond. I'm sorry, I actually don't ski. This is where we're going to get way at the edges of the metaphor because I'm not a great skier. But that is what I imagine it's like to go skiing. And so you go there because it's the safest place to do it. Anyone here probably could go to a snowy mountain and go skiing, but you'd be, possibly inclined to end up with one of those helicopters coming to find you, which is an expensive operation for everybody. So another principle occurred to me at this point is that a product's metaphors really matter. When I speak to anybody in the company and say, we're creating guardrails, we're helping people stay on the slopes, we're helping people understand where the slopes even are, I have a mechanism, because of the metaphor of a ski resort, to tell people what the platform as a product is. I can even say that certain parts of what we'd like to be the platform product are not a product yet, because they're not a discernible ski slope. They're just not there. If they're still wilderness, where we're running search and rescue, we haven't yet created the product clarity in that space. So the metaphor is a vehicle to say this is what the product is and what it's not. And it's hopefully one that people can relate to and understand. So this helped Jules a great deal because she's like, oh, so you create a place, really? A place where people inhabit it for a period of time. And they get to work creatively and safely. And I was like, yeah, you nailed it. I didn't, but you certainly did. It's a habitat. We're creating an environment where people can do great work. That's what a platform as a product engineering group are doing. And I use the ski resort as a metaphor for it. The other thing that we realized together is it's a complex socio-technical habitat, which leads us down a certain way of approaching it. It's not good enough to just go, oh, it must be simple. We're just going to create some more infrastructure as code. Now, our platform will be done. I've seen many plans that look like that. What we need to do is have more IAC, more infrastructure as code, and then our platform will be so much better. No, it won't. No, it won't. So it's complex, it's socio-technical. That gives us some steers. The first steer it gives us is we're going to need to go and explore it. We're going to need to go and figure it out. Just simple off-the-shelf answers will not be the answer. So that's all good. Jules was still with me. It was wonderful to have a captive audience of Jules for 6 weeks, just like I've got you now, sort of. She said, so what does a good habitat look like? When you're trying to create a habitat that is a platform as a product, what do you do with it? Week 3, I came back with an answer. I said, a habitat lifts people up. A platform lifts people up, helps them do better work than they believed they could do before. I was harking back to my days on the Spring Framework, where I was made to look smarter than I was. I liked that experience. I felt good with that. I would accept certain freedoms being sacrificed in the product if I could be made to look clever for once. I think we're all slightly in that camp. So that was what the habitat needs to do. And sorry for the wrestling reference. It was to do, had a loose connection to Plato, the philosopher, and the fact that, he was a wrestler and Plato, a platform. It really didn't work. But I had to keep the picture because it made me giggle. Okay, so you lift people up, not slap them down. You lift people up with your habitat. How? Okay, so we have to remind ourselves of what those teams are trying to do. We are not trying to constrain the teams creatively. We're trying to help them be more creative. And to do that, we want to help them have more confidence. We want to help our teams be smarter than they've ever been before. Faster, smarter, all those good things that will help them feel like they're thriving. So this is one of the principles we then applied, the idea of how do we help the engineers in our product teams know they're in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing in a good way, and feel that they know where the creativity possibilities are. If we don't have any of that clarity in our platform as a product, we're not serving them well. And this is how I describe it. I completely abused the hierarchy of needs to explain this. And I have to admit, at the time, in the chemo lounge, I couldn't even remember what the levels are off the top of my head. But once I figured it out and gone and looked on Google, because that worked there, we could look at it and go, okay, what's the base level for a really successful platform as a product? Well, the first thing is, can anyone even identify it? Can they see a ski slope? Do they know where the ski slope ends and where other things are, where a danger begins? If someone cannot identify your product doesn't exist. So we needed to find a way to clarify it to the point where people knew the product existed. We then could, like table stakes, help people know that what the products they're building on top of our platform are reliable and secure and following regulatory compliance, actually. So when we could give them that, we're giving them value on top. Then we start to get into the difficult areas. We want to give them the freedom to create the products their way. So getting the balance of what are the abstractions that we want to keep standardized and where do we want to leave the ability to go off-piste, that's where that happens. Freedom of quality. This was an interesting one. Not every product needs to be, as Simon was pointing out, incredibly scalable to the nth degree. Some products, I've known products that we've created that could probably only live for a few weeks to get us some business, and then we've got another product that matters. Not that one. That one could be retired. There are very few companies that consider the retirement phase of a product when it comes to what does that mean to the platform that underpins it. So we wanted to give a certain degree of power and empowerment around quality as well, so that not every product had to be held to important business service that we have to prove to the regulator in every nth degree, for example. Freedom to contribute, this is my open source roots again. Making that code communicable, putting all the effort into the platform, code itself so that anyone could look at it and contribute to it. This came actually from a really strong steer from one of the engineering teams in the company. They turned around and said, you can create a platform, but please don't create one that's special. We want boring. Genuinely, they said, I don't want one that makes me look great here and rubbish elsewhere. Which is an important facet, because a platform as a product is a learned experience. It's going to be an investment in their skills. If you take away important skills from people, then you're actually reducing their value in the marketplace, which is a factor. So we made sure that there was always this freedom to contribute. You didn't lose your chops. If you really want to write Terraform, you can. But you don't have to, because the platform maybe caters for you in that regard. And finally, freedom of expression. This was a big deal for some of our teams. They wanted to be able to show what they'd done internally and externally to people. And so we wanted to make sure that we didn't create something that was so esoteric, so different, that it was not meaningful to anybody else. And also inter-team freedom of expression. So a team could show another team what they did, and there was a mechanism for that that would help others then maybe consider doing the same thing and bringing it into the platform. So all of these levels are useful, but you don't have to have all of them up front. But they're important considerations to make a platform that's successful. And whilst you're doing that, the baseline principle that I use is, are we empowering the people depending on our platform with a balance of freedoms and those constraints? Are we helping them look better, look great? Are we helping them create well? Or are we getting in their way? And that was an important difference in a platform, because there's a little secret to internal platform development, is that you've got a captive audience, right? This idea of we need to attract people to use it, that works when they can say no. But in many companies, they aren't going to be able to say no. So we need to make sure that that captive audience is really well served by looking at these balances to help make sure that we're actually empowering them. Otherwise, you'll just create the conditions for them to leave. So how do you tune the empowerment across all of those needs? I had an instinct that this was a culturally sensitive thing. Some companies might do this differently. I'd be wired differently for this. So in week 4, I still believed it was culturally sensitive, and I looked at the culture we had. In our systems, where I currently am, we optimize for autonomy with accountability and responsibility. So anything the platform provided had to make sure it helped people feel more like that, not less. So we wanted to meet the needs of the creative autonomy whilst making sure that we could hit a broad community. So one of the things we did is we made sure that our platform didn't just serve the engineers. We served the product owners. We did that because our product owners needed to own the whole product, including its technical manifestations. So we built in the mechanisms where the product owners could understand their products as much as the engineering teams themselves. Okay, so meeting all those needs could be complicated. Week 5. It's not that complicated. As it turns out, we thought it might be, but no, it's not. I learned a big lesson recently when I wrote this book. I learned the lesson that cloud-native application protection platforms really only do one thing. They help multiple communities collaborate through tuned OODA loops. The OODA loops, not dissimilar from the ones that Simon was mentioning earlier. As soon as I realized that, I also realized that's where a great internal developer platform sits as well. We capture the behavior, the OODA loops, that we need to support to help a product development team do great things. We build OODA loops to support that activity. Focusing on OODA loops and not on APIs on their own, not even on abstractions on their own, focusing on what behaviors improve was a complete game changer for the platform that we could build. So it's your OODA loops that are the experience you're trying to optimize for. And that's where we began. Every single change to our platform has been based upon what OODA loop is it changing. Not just what are we showing people, or even what can they do. We try to help them be smarter by joining the loop and saying, here's what you can see, here's how you discuss it, and decide upon it, and act on it. We don't always say it as brutally as that, but that's what we're trying to do. Okay, in terms of what behaviors should we optimize for? This is where I need to dispel something that maybe some people are aware of, but it's really important. Does anyone know who said this, or wrote this down? I think it's probably the fair phrase. Descartes. Wrong. But not entirely, okay? Just a little bit wrong. Because, yes, it was Descartes, but that wasn't all he wrote. People forget the very first thing on that sentence, which was dubito. Anyone know what dubito means? I doubt. I doubt, therefore, I think, therefore, I am. That dubito was very important. It's very important to what a product owner stroke steward does. You start with doubt. You do not know what a good platform is going to be in your environment. You do not know what a good ski slope looks like in your environment. Okay, you start with doubt and you realize you're not the expert. I learned this the hard way. I've trained as a Samaritan's listener in the UK. If you're not familiar with what we do, we take phone calls from people in crisis. The first lesson of being a Samaritan is you are not the expert on anyone else. Whatever they say to you is new information. Their view of the world is their view of the world. It's a brilliant practice for product people because it forces you to doubt everything, forces you to go and gather information before you make big product decisions. You have to follow the needs, go and find out what people are needing across this entire hierarchy. And just like the hierarchy as it is currently stated as in proper form, it's not a one-way sort of drive. You veer all over this thing when you're searching for the needs. You follow the cognitive load. You try to empower, not dumb down. I'm not trying to constrain people. I don't standardize when something is very domain or context specific. I learned that lesson the really hard way by creating an open source framework that tries to own the whole picture and people only standardize the middle bit. If you want to know more about that, I can talk about that some other time. You can get me a coffee and I'll tell you all about that pain. And the other thing we do is follow the chaos. Where are people getting lost on the mountain? Where are all of these wonderful signals coming to us saying, we tried to do this, we got it wrong? Your support queues are gold mines. Okay, and the principle for that is that there are no stupid users. Every single user of your platform is telling you how it can be a better platform, whatever their behavior is. But be wary of the pigeons. This was a phrase used to me by my boss when I joined my recent company. She said, don't feed the pigeons. What she means is don't reinforce the behaviors you don't want. Don't standardize on the stuff you sit there and go, no, we don't want anyone doing that. So there is still an element of refinement and pushback as part of the job. Okay, in terms of mapping the road ahead, everything is experiment-driven. Why? It's a complex socio-technical environment. We can have hypotheses. We can even talk to people and find out what they think is the right steer. But until we run an experiment, we are devoid of any knowledge about the system. So we do everything through experiments, formalized experiments, ideally with as short a feedback loop as possible, with as many leading indicators as possible. Okay, we're talking about leading indicators for a moment. How do we measure success? Okay, in week 6, I had to take that one away, right? Measurement's hard. Measuring our product success is hard. After the fact, it's pretty easy. Are we making money is one steer. Do we have millions of users? That's good. But to take those measurements and lead with that as the goal, it doesn't really help you formulate a product. So because it's a complex socio-technical environment that we're working with, we can have a lot of mechanisms that can help us gather information, help us look for measurements. These are just some. We use them all. And in fact, there's a lovely phrase there from a company I spoke to a couple of weeks ago, where they said the most important thing we've ever done was to adopt the DX platform because now we can measure things we never could before. However, measurements don't drive your product. Measurements won't tell you what to prioritize particularly. Experiments might. And there's a danger in measurement. There's also a danger in abstractions generally. There's a danger in product personas. It can be dehumanizing. Now that's awkward because we're dealing with a complex socio-technical environment. Because in that environment, to know what better feels like, to know that the consumers, the people using your platform are having a better life because of your platform, it's through their stories that you can find this out. Stories are pretty much the only way of figuring out, are people doing more of what they would like to do versus what they don't want to be doing so much. And then this is a message. If abstraction has a dangerous quality of reducing compassion. There's numbers I could show you and say to you, is this a big number, is this a problem? And you wouldn't know until I gave you the story behind that number. So this led me to an epiphany when it came to the platform products I was building. It's internal. That really matters. If I want the stories, I have an enormous opportunity. I can go and have coffee with absolutely anyone who's using my platform. I couldn't do that at SpringSource, it was a bit harder. But internally in a company where I've got maybe 1 engineer to 10 product engineers, streamline product engineers, I can go and sit down with them. I can go and pair with them. As a technical product owner, I'm probably not a complete burden to pair up with them and understand their pain. I call that Gemba over guessing. We go and actually experience it. I encourage the engineering teams to take vacations in the organization to go and see what it's like to develop with the platform product they're curating. Feel it. See what it's like in a stand-up when it's fighting people. In all of that is absolutely, again, the gold dust of how do we prioritize a great platform product. Not least of all, because you'll build, as a product owner, empathy, compassion, and connection with those people that are hopefully gaining from your platform. Okay, quick epilogue then, to race to the end here. At the end of my 6 weeks, it's fair to say that the chemoradiotherapy had taken its toll. I'd lost 1/3 of my body weight, and I was very dangerously close to needing to be force-fed by other mechanisms. However, I'm lucky. First of all, I'm here. I was lucky then because I got to go, there's 2 doors out of a cancer experience. I got to go through one door. Jules went through another. She'd had enough of the chemotherapy. It was, I think, the 3rd or 4th trial through. But before she passed away, we did have a chance to catch up. And I can't say it was the biggest question on our mind, but it did come up again, which is, what are you really here for? And now I knew. I had an answer for her. It's other people. I don't care about the product. I don't care about the engineering of building it. But when you see what it can do for people using it, when you can sit with them and see their joys and some of their pains, then there's an unbridled joy in it. There's a reason to be here in that. And so it comes from the fact that it turns out I care about other people. And I really care about their stories. I really care about them having more stories in their life of how they created something phenomenal versus oh yeah, we fought the system for a while and then I left and went to another company. I want more of the former. So when you're building, and I hope I'm encouraging you to think about become a platform product owner or product steward, remember you're doing something important. You're saving their life. You're injecting better stories into their lives. Nothing feels like that in tech. And I'm doing it for my colleagues. I'm doing it for people I see, which is incredible. This is how I do it. I call it the really, really jazzy off the tongue phrase, experimental person-centered product stewardship. Person-centered because it's actually a counseling modality. There's an incredible person called Carl Rogers. If you haven't read any of his stuff, please read up on Carl. He talks a lot about the fact you're not the expert, and the only way that you can get to know people and help people is by getting in their world, exploring empathy with them. And it relates, I think, to the fantastic work that April does with compassionate coding. If you aren't familiar with that, then please go check it out. Because it sounds a bit like an oxymoron. It's not. It's incredible. And I now call my stuff, sorry for the picture, it's my dog. Compassionate, it was a photo shoot, and that was what they came up with. That cost me a fortune. Turns out if you get a photo shot with cats, they're literally like, I don't want to be here. Dogs, they ham it up. So yeah, compassionate technical product stewardship. That's what I do. That's what I care about. That's why I'm still here. And that's why I love what I do every day. And I'd encourage you to think about doing it yourselves. This is a quote we have on the wall at the Samaritan Center when I'm taking calls from people in crisis. And it's just a reminder that no one's going to remember what you build. No one's going to remember what you did with them, but everyone remembers how you make them feel. Even I remember how spring made me feel 15 years ago. See if you can build some things like that. We need you. So come and join me as a product steward, please. Thank you so much, everybody. Appreciate you.